both have a parent who has dementia, and that's quite the journey. But I wonder, is that my destiny too?
My mum was diagnosed with dementia before she even hit 70. Yeah, I'd be lying if I said I didn't have really deep fears about that being my destiny as well.
There is definitely this societal view that as you get older, the older you are, the more irrelevant you become. Well, let me tell you, old has its advantages, and there's a lot of wisdom that comes with that age.
Welcome to Midlife Unfiltered, a podcast about unapologetically embracing the season of me as we live the lives we want in midlife and beyond. I'm Anita McLachlan.
I'm Erica Webb. We're here to make some noise, say hell no to outdated stereotypes, and hell yes to living life on our terms.
Erica, I've got a question for you. I'm curious to know your answer to this. What do these women have in common? You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Sophia Loren, Dame Judi Dench, personal fave, Maggie Smith, Bridget Bardot.
Female actresses?
Yes, no shit, Sherlock. Anything else?
Older female actresses?
Yes, you're getting warm. We're getting closer to today's topic of conversation. They are all turning 90 this year. Can you believe
Wow.
that? They're going to be
No.
90 and they are fucking awesome and they're turning 90. I want to be fucking awesome and turning 90. How about you?
Absolutely. I mean, you're pretty fucking awesome right now, so I can't imagine that changing. But I love this idea of being able to be vibrant and healthy and still loving life at 90.
Yeah, absolutely. I've just had a wonderful experience where my zio, I'm half Italian, so zio is uncle for those who are non-Italian listening in, and he just turned 90. And he's a man of no fuss, but to him, celebrating turning 90 was a really big thing. And he wanted fireworks. So we had the fireworks. It was so
That's
good.
amazing.
And while I was there, I got to catch up with a dear old family friend. She's 93 and she still drives all around the back roads of Australia. I know.
Wow.
She's incredible. And then there's my father-in-law, who I love to death. He's down your way. He's in Melbourne. And he drives regularly from Melbourne to Sydney. And he's also involved on boards, in groups. His life is filled with so much purpose, and that's what drives him. And we all say, if those purposes were ever taken out of his life, I know it would actually drain it from him, probably.
That is so amazing. I must admit, I don't know any 90-year-olds.
Well, you are younger than me, and that's what the season of me is all about, isn't it? That's why we decided to do this podcast together, because I'm 56, you're 41. Yeah. So, and then we'll have guests on here who are in their 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, because we've got so much that we can learn from each other. But also, if I can wind the clock back to my 30-year-old self, what would I have wanted to know? Maybe not so much what lay ahead for me, because I know it's a very individual thing, but there are some gems that we can tuck away to help us get ready for what lies ahead. And that's what I'm really excited about, having this conversation with you.
Oh, same. I can't wait.
So good. And we also share something else in common other than wanting to do this together and appreciating each other, is that we both have a parent who has dementia. And that's quite the journey. It's quite the experience. And again, looking at future self, I sometimes look at my beautiful dad, and I hope I can do this without crying. But I wonder, is that my destiny too?
Yeah.
How do you feel about that when you look at your beautiful mum?
It is so hard Same. I hope I can do it without crying. My mum was diagnosed with dementia before she even hit 70, and she now lives in full-time supported care and is nothing of the woman that she once was, who was warm and loving and so involved in her community. And yeah, I'd be lying if I said I didn't have really deep fears about that being my destiny as well. And I think about it a lot. I try not to let it be kind of the dominating force, but it is something that we see and we hear about all the time. It is a medical issue that is increasingly problematic. And I do feel very inspired to have a different trajectory for sure. And I know not all of it is in my control, but the things that are, I want to make a difference to future me.
Well, 75%, Erica, is in your control. That's the scientific fact behind all of this. You know, studies and studies and studies are increasingly coming to that conclusion. So there is a lot of hope for us that our parents' dementia is not our destiny. And I think later on we plan on doing some more in-depth conversations around dementia too, because I know in my community, women are dealing with this themselves with partners, and they want to know more, or they're, one of their parents like we are. So, and considering that, 50% or more than 50% of people who suffer with dementia are women,
Mm.
it is a really, it's something that we need to have on our radar, not to overly concern ourselves with, but to do things that we can try and that are in our control to give our brains a really good chance of being fantastic at 90 and 100.
Yeah.
So all of this talk about longevity, which I know seems to be a bit of a buzzword, this is why, because there's a great opportunity before us, and science is catching up, and there's a whole lot of reasons, but we are living longer. We're living longer, this generation, than our parents lived, and then their parents before them. And so this whole notion of, being in retirement, and how we live out our later life, if we're living longer, I think there's something else that's out there scientifically. It's called, let me just check my notes because I need to get that right. It's called the longevity point or something like that. Let me see. Anyway, there is a point that I think in about 20 to 30 years' time, for every year that we're on the planet, science is going to give us another year
Wow. I think
adding
you're
on.
referring to the longevity escape velocity, a term that I actually learned from you.
See, now I could blame potential dementia on that, but I know that's just a momentary loss of fact that's floated away somewhere in the back of my brain that one day will come back. But thank you for that, for saving me, Erica.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And when I heard that, I just thought, holy shit, that's pretty mind blowing. So I look at my nieces who are, and probably the same age as your sons, right? For them, living to 90 is a real thing. Like
Yeah.
that's going to happen for them, and maybe even 100. So
Yeah.
that's there's a whole reason there now, the fact that we're living longer, um, that we have to, do what we can now to get ready for that. And what does that look like for us? So it's not only our lifespan, that number that we reach, but it's our health span too, isn't it? How we want to age well.
Yeah.
We don't just want to hit a number. We want to hit it well.
Well, and as you said that, I'm thinking exactly that, because there are days where, I go and visit my mum in the aged care home and you see the people in the memory support unit. And I often think to myself, what a cruel reality, right? To have to potentially live out 90 years at 70 something without that health. And so I do think about that often, this idea of a health span as opposed to a lifespan. I don't want to live to 100 if I feel like shit. I don't want to live to 100 if I am a shell of the person that I once was. But if I can be vibrant and I can be, involved in my grandchildren and maybe even great grandchildren's lives, and to be still driving myself around and exercising and doing things that I love, then yes, sign me up. I want to do that. That's absolutely something that I would, love to be a reality for me. But I don't want to be, the typical vision that we have of an old woman who is kind of decrepit and irrelevant and constantly, cranky and sore and can't walk straight. I don't want that.
Yeah, and that makes me think about the whole ageism issue that we have too, right? So you probably don't feel it as much as I'm starting to feel that more, So there is definitely this societal view that as you get older, the older you are, the more irrelevant you become. And I know many women that I've had conversations with, and I think you have too in your community, where it's that irrelevance, it's that not being seen, it's the disrespect sometimes, like, oh, what do you know? You're just old, right? Oh, you're just old. Well, let me tell you, old has its advantages and there's a lot of wisdom that comes with that age. But I think that is another filter that we need to bust. And we need to start now because there's a few things here. So there is the societal image and expectation that being old means, like you said, being a husk and a shell of your former self. But there's also that you are irrelevant, that you have very little to offer. But if we're living longer and better, then there's a lot of things that are going to have to change. It's going to, particularly in the workforce, right? So if we're living to 90, well, why would I want to retire at 50 and then, go and play golf for 40 years? That
Unless you really like golf.
well, could probably turn pro at 50, right? But there it is, right? It's now the ebb and flow of these seasons, our acts, where, we want to reinvent ourselves at different times, right? So I'm in that zone right now where I I know I've said to you, and I'll say it openly, I'm in sabbatical mode right now. I've pulled back. I've made a lot of changes in my business. I've dropped the shop. I don't retail directly now. And that's created a whole lot of space in my life where I can explore and just be and learn. And I am so happy, I've got to tell you, because I feel like I'm prepping myself for the next invention of me, the next version of me 2.0. Maybe it's me 3.0. I don't know. But yeah, and I'm excited for that. And I think if we can live our lives like that, where we take these pauses and we go, oh, what do I want to do that's different? Where do I see myself maybe in 5 years' time? It might not be that 20-year window or that 10-year window, but what's next for me? What's going to set my soul on fire? And how can I contribute differently? What's going to matter?
I really love that. And it's interesting, I said I'm 41 and even and now I look at that and I'm like, you're still so young. You can still do so much. But the reality is that there is this stigma around anything kind of 40 and above, and that says, we're on the downhill slope. So anything important that you were going to do, you've probably done by now. And I know, like, for my own life, the thought of that being true just kind of breaks my heart a little bit, because I'm like, that can't be it. That can't be all I have to offer the world. And so I love to hear you say that about this kind of version 3.0 and still dreaming in these blocks of time that are really realistic, to be able to have an impact on yourself, to be able to have an impact on the world, and to be able to make these differences that, for whatever reason, society says, like, you're done. My kids are still not even that old. I've got kids that are still at primary school. So to suggest that my life is kind of just entering the beginning of its downhill slope, what an insult. No, absolutely not. I'm on the up for sure.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's how I feel. I feel now more vibrant and healthier than I did in my 40s. When I was running around after my kids and parenting half the time on my own because my husband was often away for work. So I'm loving this time of my life, and I feel really, really good. And I know that it's also because of the effort that I'm putting in to doing that. Absolutely, they're the deliberate choices that I make. I've made health my number one focus, but also the changes that have happened in my body, and menopause, being I'm postmenopausal, there are things that change inside of us going through that whole transition, and I know you've got that ahead of you. Girlfriend, at times it can be a wild ride, but it doesn't have to be. Mine wasn't a wild ride. There were a few hiccups along the way, but I got through that. But it can be for a lot of women. But inside of us, all of those changes, physiologically for us, means that no fucks given thing is really real. Falling estrogen gives us that blessing. And also, we get our brains just somehow enable us to focus more and do things. So I now can focus better on things than what I was doing in my 40s and 30s, where I was, juggling a million and one things deliberately. Now I've got more space and time, but also I know in here. And I've had that conversation with a friend of mine recently too, where she's a she's a radiologist, and she works 4 days a week. She's got a pretty intense job, and she said that she's noticed that too, that she's able to focus now a lot better than what she's
Which
ever
I
done
find so
before.
interesting when the stereotype says you're gonna,
Lose your
lose
mind.
your memory, you're a bit doddery, you're just getting old. So I love hearing that. That's awesome.
Yeah, this is one of the filters I want to bust. It's not getting older is doesn't mean it's the end and we have to wither and die. I keep saying to myself, this is my mantra, girl, you are just getting started, and that's exactly how I feel.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's interesting to talk about these filters. I think about this a lot, particularly in my line of work, around this idea of the filters that we see ourselves through and the filters that society sees us through, and the way that that can change the way that we behave and the things that we choose to do. And really, it's kind of like a form of fear, right? A fear of the things that could happen to us. And I feel like it's a tool of control.
Oh,
And that can really make us feel kind of hopeless and full of shame. And that's one of the other things that we're going to talk about as well.
yeah, shame is a big thing. And in my world, in Sequins and Sand land, I've seen that show up in body shame, for a lot of women. The very act of getting into a swimsuit brings out a whole lot of shame, because they measure themselves up against what society says is the beautiful body, and they fall short. And in that
Mm.
falling short is what builds the shame. And I firmly believe that it's trying to measure against those expectations and falling short that really does drive a lot of shame for women. Do you find that in the women that you help?
Oh, absolutely. From everything from body image to the way that we work, the work that we choose to do, the way that we parent or not, it shows up in so many different areas. And the thing that I find interesting and heartbreaking simultaneously is how shame can really kind of take hold in every little corner of our worlds. And I do find that it seems to have a ramping up effect as we kind of hit 40 and beyond. Because when we look in the mirror, things don't look the same way, I I'm letting myself naturally go grey, which you can't see very well on the camera, but when I kind of dry my hair off and things, I can see it's all streaked with silver. And even little things like that, it's not really the norm. And there are days where I think, am I doing the wrong thing? Like, am I going to regret this? Would I look younger if I dyed it? All these questions. And, I start to think about, like, what can I do about these wrinkles, and and I see this all the time where women are like, I don't think my body should look like this. I'm too embarrassed to go here or there or do this or do that. And the shame, the wild thing about shame is that shame says it shouldn't be that way. And this is where I think we can make a difference in having these conversations, to realize that all of these things that happen to us as we get older and as we enter those, second and third acts, it's not the wrong way. It's not that things shouldn't be happening like that. It's just what happens. But if society tells us that it's, not good enough because it's not what you look like at 20, then of course we're going to feel shame. But if we can rewrite that narrative to say, this is what it is to be older, and there's no problem. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing shameful about that. You don't have to change how you look. And also, you have agency, so you can choose. That changes everything. But I think we often feed off each other's shame too, right? If you were to complain to me about your wrinkles, I'd probably match you and say, "Oh, well, don't worry, I'm doing." We kind of help each other along in feeding that shame. And I would love to see that narrative change to kind of help each other along to feed our inherent worthiness, even as we go through these changes as we age.
Yeah, a few things just came into mind then when you were talking about that. That whole, because shame says I am bad. Guilty says I did bad. It's an act, whereas shame says I am bad. And that whole notion of we feed off each other, in the shame spiral, is because we want to fit in, we want to belong, and if we are a bit different to everybody else, then you know we're going to stand out. And as humans, that's terrifying that we're not part of the tribe, because belonging in a tribe means survival, right? Part of what's driving me now is I really want women to own who they are and to feel the freedom and the courage and the confidence to express that in whatever way they choose to, whether it's how they choose to look, as long as it's coming from a place of purity within them. This is me and this is why I want to do that, not because I feel I have to, but because this matters to me and I want to. And sure, that's the whole blurriness of it all too, isn't it? Because we are so influenced by what is around us and what we see and take in every day. But I really want that for women. And through having these conversations, I'm hoping that women will see that they are enough just the way they absolutely are. And being an individual is what matters most. Fuck them, honestly. Just be who you are and own it, And I know that's easier said than
Absolutely.
done.
Yeah. And I think, I'm only just in my 40s. I'm 41, but it's been remarkable to me to notice how that desire to be authentic, that desire to kind of start to see the societal filters and expectations, I'm really enjoying tearing them down. I'm really finding that, these first couple of years of being in my 40s, that's been the most remarkable thing for me, is being able to hold the curiosity to go, "Oh, is that mine? Or is that conditioning that I have held on to for 40 years that I'm now ready to shed?" And so I feel very much as though my 40s so far have been this process of discovering who I actually am outside of these filters and expectations and conditioning, because, you know, none of us escape that. None of us escape the conditioning. And so I think when you sort of said there's that kind of murky kind of line, there's that fine line between the conditioning and the authenticity. What I would say to that is and we're going to do a whole episode on curiosity, but I would say to that, it's an opening and an invitation into curiosity, because we don't always know. Sometimes the things that we've been conditioned into are authentic parts of who we want to be, and other times we have to shed them and we have to burn them. So I think that sense of being curious and being open to, who am I going to discover myself to be today? I think that's really exciting.
Yeah, very exciting. I agree. And yes, I can't wait to do our episode on curiosity. I think it's a skill that we also need to hone, because it's through that curiosity that we are then open to new experiences. And I've been doing a lot of reading about brain health, and um, our brains have this enormous capacity to be plastic and to create new pathways. And it's through exploration and new experiences that those new pathways are opened up. So other pathways shut down, but new ones can be opened up. And that means that we can live longer, better, by opening up more pathways. It's just so
Nothing
exciting.
set in stone.
No, nothing set in stone. No, that's
I
right.
love
We have
that.
the power. Yeah, we have the
It's so
power.
good. Anita, this chat today, our first episode, is really about, I guess, introducing this notion of your future self. And I want to know what you want for your future self, Anita. What does that look like when you kind of zoom forward and you think of yourself in your 70s, your 80s, your 90s? What do you see? What do you hope for? What do you dream?
I want to be making a bit of trouble.
Ooh, I like
I
that.
see myself being a bit annoying and mischievous, you know. I wanna be fun. I want to be energetic. I want to be a part of those that I love, their lives, and I want to experience I want to be unafraid of experiencing new things. And I know that's a big ideal, and that, yes, you know, there are my muscles will not be as strong unless I work them, and there'll be physical things that won't work as well. But I see my life being very vibrant, and I'm looking forward to exploring all of um, all of what that means, you know, whatever I choose to do. And yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to. That
I
whole
can see that. I can see you being a very cheeky 90-year-old, and I love that. I
look
will
out,
get
Erica.
behind all the cheekiness. Absolutely.
How about you?
I see myself, I think movement is a big part of my life, and creativity has always been a really big part of my life. And I've always had a dream of kind of bringing more creativity into my everyday. So I kind of see my future self as learning some of the skills that I maybe haven't given a lot of time to in these first 40 years. I would love to be the kind of older woman who is out making like a really wildly beautiful garden and growing things and painting things and being able to get up and down off the floor forever and being able to carry my grandchildren even when I'm 70 and 80 and 90 and being able to play with them and maybe even still being able to pick up a video game controller and like know how to do that. I just love the idea of, like, you not being afraid of change, not being afraid of new things, and continuing to trust my body. That's a really big one for me. I want to be able to trust my body to be able to see me through all of the adventures that I hope that I will continue to have.
Yeah. I think it's important that we think that we're not worthy to have all of that. You know, we absolutely have to have that hope, and to know that it's there for us to take.
Yeah.
We have to be brave enough to take the steps to make it happen, and not to lose sight of the fact that it absolutely can. It's very real, it's very possible.
Mm. Yes, I love that so much. So I think we should segue into talking about what we hope for our listeners. I would love to invite our listeners to think about future you.
Mm.
What is she doing? What is she proud of? How is she feeling? What is she fearing? And what is it that you hope for? We would love to hear from you as well. I would love to know, as you think about your future self, like, what do you see? What do you dream for? And has our conversation hopefully sparked a little bit of extra joy and possibility into that imagining? I hope so. That's what I really hope for.
Yeah, 100%. I hope that too. And I hope that women take the time to make the space and to actually think about this. It's the first step, because again, when we talk about how we've been brought up in society, I think there's a lot of stuff that gets in the way, and a lot of it we use as excuses for not to tackle some of this stuff that really matters. But when I say to you, what do you want and who do you want to be? It's like, they are really big questions. But that's what we're talking about here is, is future you is, how do you see yourself? And, what matters to you and how do you want to live it? They're really big questions. And I think they're not insurmountable questions. They're questions that absolutely have answers. But I think to actually carve out that time and go, yep, I'm going to confront this. And it can be quite confronting. I'm going to look this in the eye and go, yeah, what does that mean for me? And really dig deep, not just some superficial stuff, like, what do you want to do and why does that matter to you? Really go down deep and keep going. And why does that matter? And why does that matter? And why does that matter? Because when we get to the bottom of that, at that point in time on that day, then I believe that that almost acts like a North Star for the change that we want to see and become as future us.
That's beautiful. And I want to add one thing that's just popped to mind that I think is really important. Sometimes when we're invited to consider these things and we're invited to consider how we can take responsibility for a lot of the things in our lives, that is often done in shame-driven ways. We are often marketed to in ways that do bring up shame and that do bring up guilt and that do make us feel just kind of shit about ourselves. And I kind of like want to point out that that is just like not our MO. That is not how Anita and I operate at all. And it will be sometimes our default, though, as humans, to receive things like that through this lens of shame. And so I really invite you, if you're like, oh, I feel bad because I've done these things that I think are going to affect my longevity, or I feel, any kind of thing that brings up shame, can you get curious about that and really lean into the hope and the agency that these questions can bring up rather than the shame? Because we're all familiar with shame marketing. We're all familiar with guilt marketing. It is kind of just the standard, which is really disappointing and a whole other conversation. But it doesn't have to be that way. We do not have to drive ourselves into health promoting behaviors via shame. There is a better way, and we are going to continue to share that with you because I think that really, really matters.
Yeah, 100%. And I think too, when you can peel back the filters and go, oh, they're actually marketing to me that way. Because that's a
Mhm.
whole other level of awareness too, isn't it? We know half the time we probably don't even realize that that's what's happening.
Oh,
But
we're so used to it.
we're so used to it. It's just the way it
Yeah.
is, right? You've got a problem. I'm telling you, you've got a problem and you need to fix that.
Take we'll take your money if you'd like us to fix it.
Yeah, yeah. And you know what? It can fix it quickly and it's so easy. Just do
Yeah.
this and it's gone in a snap. But the stuff we're talking about here, it's not a quick
Lies.
fix.
No.
It's not a quick fix, and it's not always easy. But I think it's invaluable because it does give
Mhm.
us that hope and that possible. And we're going to be
Yeah,
here
and
for a
it's not a
long time.
fix. Right? That's the thing, because 'cause you're not broken. It's not a fix. You don't
No,
fix things that aren't broken. It is an enhancement. It is a support. It is a thing that you can do to, support yourself to live that life that you dream of in your 80s and 90s. It's not a fix because you're not broken.
mm. So here's to Sophia and to Dame Judy and to my Zio and to my nonna. Actually, she was 92, riding a bike in her 80s. Incredible. Here's to them for showing us the way. And here's to you, because I know that you want to live a long life well and are going to do that your way. And here's to me. And here's to all of our listeners who, from this day forward, have decided that's going to be them too. Well, that's a wrap for this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. I feel really honored and privileged that you've done that. Thank you for being my partner in crime, Erica. I really love having conversations with you. And I just hope that if you're listening in or watching in, that there's something you can take away from today's chat that will help you, your future you.
I feel exactly the same way, Anita. I feel so honored to be here with you. And for everybody listening, remember that you can follow along on YouTube, anywhere that you listen to your podcasts, and we're also on Instagram. You'll find all the details for how to follow us in all of those places in the show notes.
Fantastic. Well said. Thank you, Erica. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.
See you soon.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you for joining us for Midlife Unfiltered. If you loved this episode, you're going to love what's coming next. Be sure you're subscribed on your platform of choice so you don't miss a thing.
We'd also be delighted, and for sure do a little happy dance, if you took the time to leave us a rating and review. Those not only absolutely make our day, but more importantly, it helps other women who may be wanting something more from their midlife to know about us and to listen in as well. You can connect with us on socials too. You'll find links to connect on LinkedIn, Instagram, and email in the show notes.